The fire should have taken the whole house. I stood in the driveway barefoot, watching the flames crawl up the curtains inside my living room like hungry fingers. Red and gold light flickered across the windows, turning the glass into a pulsing heartbeat. The firefighters shouted orders, hoses roared, neighbors gathered in clusters whispering guesses about what had happened. But none of them knew the truth. None of them knew that I had started this whole chain reaction long before the first spark ever touched the wall. Not with a match, not with gasoline, but with suspicion. Suspicion I never should have followed. My name is Cole Mercer, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I understood the difference between truth and paranoia. I make my living dissecting people's secrets, pulling apart their lies with the patience of a surgeon. 10 years as a private investigator had taught me that everyone hides something. Everyone. But the one person I believed was different, the one person I trusted without question, was my wife. Her name was Mira. We were married for 9 years, long enough to memorize each other's habits, long enough to stop pretending we were perfect, long enough for me to believe we were unbreakable. I was wrong. The night of the fire, as I watched my life blister and curl into smoke, all I could think about was the moment everything had begun to fall apart. 3 weeks earlier, when a stranger walked into my office and placed a photograph on my desk. A photograph that made my pulse stop, because the woman in it was Mira. 3 weeks before the fire, my life was still intact. It was a Tuesday, always Tuesday, the day trouble prefers. Rain hammered against the dusty windows of my office, turning the city outside into a blur of smeared gray silhouettes. I had just finished a routine report for a client who already knew his wife was cheating but needed the official confirmation to feel justified in his rage. Most of my cases were exactly like that, predictable, repetitive, mechanical. But that afternoon, the door opened with a soft chime, and a man walked in who didn't fit the usual pattern. He moved with precise, almost clinical confidence. His suit was tailored, too smooth for this part of town, and his shoes, polished so perfectly they reflected the ceiling lights like black mirrors. I'd seen a lot of people try to impress me over the years, but this man didn't seem interested in being liked. He wanted something. "Mr. Mercer?" he asked, voice steady. "That's me," I said, leaning back in my chair. "You're early. I don't remember expecting anyone." He offered a slim smile that didn't reach his eyes and set a folder on my desk. "I prefer to work without appointments," he said. "My name is Adrian Locke." I waited. He didn't continue. "All right, Mr. Locke," I said. "What do you need investigated?" He tapped the folder once, lightly, like he was touching a pressure point. "My wife," he said. "I think she's hiding something." I almost rolled my eyes. Same script, different actors. "What kind of something?" Locke hesitated, not nervously, but thoughtfully, like he was calculating exactly how much to reveal. "She disappears," he said. "Leaves the house at odd times. Says she's going to volunteer events, charity meetings, the usual. But something feels inconsistent. There's a discrepancy between her schedule and her explanations." "And you want me to follow her?" I concluded. "Yes," he said simply. "I want clarity." "And her name?" He slid a photograph out of the folder and placed it carefully on the desk, aligning the edges with surgical precision. I didn't look at first. Instead, I watched him, waiting for the tell. Everyone has one. A flicker of guilt, a tremor of jealousy, a wounded pride. But Adrian Locke's expression didn't change at all. Then I glanced down, and the air was punched out of my lungs. Because staring up at me from the photo, bright smile, wind-blown hair, eyes I had memorized in every light, was Mira, my Mira. For a moment, the world narrowed into a single point of pressure in my chest. My fingers curled into fists against the wooden desk. It took every drop of control I had not to react. Locke did not notice, or if he did, he hid it well. "You've seen her somewhere?" he asked casually. "She attends several events downtown. Perhaps you've crossed paths." I forced a slow breath. "I might have," I said, careful. "But I need to ask. Why come to me? You could have chosen an agency closer to your part of the city." That was the first time his expression shifted. a glimmer of amusement, or maybe challenge. "I was told," he said, "that you don't shy away from complicated cases." I felt the edges closing in. "And who told you that?" "A mutual acquaintance." He paused, then added, "Vincent Hale." The name hit me with the same cold jolt as touching a live wire. Vincent Hale was not a mutual acquaintance. He was a man who had sworn I'd pay for exposing his affair 2 years earlier, a billionaire with more power than conscience, the kind of client you take once and never again. And he had sent this man to me. Locke continued as if discussing weather. "Vincent recommended you highly. Said you have a talent for uncovering the truth even when others can't." The pieces began clicking into place in my head, sharp and unwelcome. Why would Hale send someone my way? Why Myra's picture? Why now? This wasn't a coincidence. But if I pushed too hard, Locke would sense something was wrong. "All right," I said. "Tell me what exactly you want from this investigation." For the first time, genuine tension crept into his posture. "I want to know," he said slowly, "if my wife is meeting someone behind my back, where she goes, who she talks to, what she hides." His eyes locked onto mine. "And I need absolute discretion. No exceptions." The irony tasted bitter in my mouth. He wanted me to shadow my own wife. He wanted me to document her secrets. And I knew with a sinking certainty that someone had orchestrated this. Someone who knew Mira. Someone who knew me. Someone who wanted me to break. "Can you take the case?" Locke asked. The room felt too small, too close. I should have said no. Should have thrown him out. Should have demanded to know who put him up to this, what game he was playing. But the truth? I was afraid. Afraid of what Locke already knew. Afraid of what he didn't. Afraid of what I might find if I followed Mira. So I nodded. "I'll take it." "Good." He stood. "Send updates daily. I value efficiency." He reached for the folder, paused, then left the photograph on my desk. "Keep it," he said. "You'll need it." As the door closed behind him, the office felt colder. I stared at the photo of Mira for a long time, trying to steady my breathing. Her smile, soft, warm, familiar, felt suddenly foreign, like a mask I'd never noticed before. I'd spent 10 years exposing other people's lies. Now I was about to expose my own life. And I had no idea that the first thread I pulled would unravel everything, including the marriage I thought was unshakable, including the truth behind Adrian Locke's visit, and including the fire that would soon devour the house I once thought was safe. But that part would come later. For now, all I knew was one thing. If I wanted answers, I had to follow Mira, even if it destroyed both of us. 3 weeks before the fire, I felt the first quiet tear in the fabric of my life. For 2 days after Locke handed me that photograph, I behaved as if nothing had changed. I went to work, cooked dinner, listened to Mira talk about her shifts. On the surface, we were the same couple we'd always been. But underneath, something cold and heavy began to settle in my chest, a pressure she didn't notice. On the 3rd day, I started following her. Her morning was exactly what she told me it would be. Hospital entrance, a quick chat with coworkers, the familiar rhythm of her routine. I sat in my car across the street, telling myself I was being paranoid. But around noon, everything shifted. She slipped out through a side door, alone. No colleagues, no lunch bag, no explanation. She looked around the parking lot with a careful, almost anxious focus. It wasn't the way someone acted when they were simply taking a break. I pulled out after her. She drove past the hospital district and onto the highway, heading straight toward downtown. She'd never gone that way on workdays. She navigated the streets like she already knew exactly where she was going. She parked near a small cafe with plants hanging from the windows. A place we had never visited together. A place that didn't belong in her routine. And then I saw him, Adrian Locke, immaculate as always, sitting at a window table as if he had been waiting. He didn't look surprised when Mira walked in. She went straight to him, no hesitation. Their greeting wasn't romantic, but it was intimate in a quiet, unmistakable way. The soft tilt of her smile, the slight lean of his posture toward her. They spoke for a long while. At one point, he slid a folded sheet of paper across the table. Mira took it and tucked it into her bag with a practiced, almost cautious movement. Over the next several days, the pattern repeated. Mira suddenly had early meetings, volunteer shifts, errands she couldn't explain. Every time, Locke was somewhere nearby, sometimes walking with her through city streets, sometimes handing her something discreetly, sometimes talking in a way that made her expression tighten, as if they were discussing something heavy. None of it looked like an affair. It looked worse. It looked deliberate. The turning point came when she drove to a dull gray building with no sign. It didn't look like a business or a clinic. It looked like a place you went only if someone told you to. She went inside with Locke and came out an hour later, pale and tense. He looked calm, always calm. That night, she kissed me hello, asked about my day, and acted as if nothing in her life had changed. I watched her the way I watched subjects under surveillance. Every gesture, every glance, every breath. And later, when she took a shower, it happened. Her phone lit up on the nightstand. I didn't touch it. I only saw the preview. Adrian, tomorrow. Same plan. Don't be late. A simple message. But it cut through me like a blade. I lay awake long after she fell asleep beside me, staring at the ceiling, at the shadows on the walls. I knew then that I had crossed a line I couldn't come back from. I was going to follow this through, whatever it was, and whatever it destroyed. The charity gala was the moment everything snapped. I'd researched Locke's movements for hours the day before, digging through event pages and press releases until I finally found it. A black tie fundraiser hosted by his nonprofit, held at a downtown hotel shimmering with chandeliers and expensive promises. And Mira, despite all her talk about weekend plans, hadn't mentioned a single word about attending. That alone was enough to push me into my car that night, wearing a blazer I hadn't used in years, parked on a side street where no one would recognize me. The hotel glowed like a golden fortress. Guests stepped out of sleek cars, laughing, greeting each other with practiced warmth. Then Mira arrived. She stepped out of a cab in a deep burgundy dress I had never seen before. It hugged her body, elegant and deliberate. Her hair was swept up. Her makeup was subtle but sharp, nothing like her usual softness. She looked like someone I didn't know, someone who belonged to a different version of life. And Locke met her at the entrance. He didn't touch her inappropriately, just a light hand on her back, a polite gesture for the crowd. But the way she leaned toward him, the way she smiled at something he whispered, made something in my chest twist painfully. I went in after them, blending into the flow of strangers. Inside, the ballroom was a world of light and sound. Champagne glasses clinking, violins humming, diamonds flashing on wrists and necks. Mira walked through the room with ease, greeting donors and doctors I'd never seen her speak to. She looked comfortable, confident, almost rehearsed. Locke stayed close, guiding her with the slightest gestures, like they were partners in something that went far beyond charity work. I watched from the edges, my camera hidden against my palm. I photographed moments I didn't understand, her smile, his subtle glances, the way they kept slipping away from the crowd as if trying to find breathing room. Everything inside me told me something was wrong, deeply, intentionally wrong. Later that night, they stepped out onto a quiet terrace overlooking the city. I followed at a distance, staying in the shadows behind a column. The cool air sharpened every sound. The hum of traffic far below, the muffled music behind the ballroom doors, their quiet voices drifting across the terrace. They stood close enough that I could see the soft tension in Myra's shoulders. Locke spoke to her in a low, steady voice. She shook her head. He reached for her hand. She pulled back. For a brief moment, her face crumpled. Pain, frustration, fear. Emotions I'd never seen her show. She turned away from him, one hand pressed to her forehead. Locke stepped closer, his voice a little louder now, though I still couldn't catch the words. Whatever he said made her look up sharply, eyes wide. Then they noticed a waiter stepping outside, and the moment broke. They returned inside, their expressions smoothed back into their public masks. I stayed alone on the terrace, my breath coming too fast. They weren't having an affair. Or if they were, it wasn't the simple version people hired me to investigate. No, this was something planned, hidden, calculated, something dangerous. The next morning, Mira left the house earlier than usual. I followed her again, expecting another secret meeting, but instead she drove to a small boutique hotel on the edge of downtown. I parked half a block away, pretending to scroll through my phone while watching her in my side mirror. And then I saw him. Locke walked out of the hotel lobby at the same time she did. They exchanged a few quiet words, both tense. Mira touched her hair nervously, the same gesture she used when she was lying. Before they could leave, Mira suddenly turned her head, scanning the street. For a terrifying second, her gaze moved directly toward my car. I ducked slightly, adjusting my posture like I was just shifting in my seat. But she wasn't looking at me. Her eyes stopped on something farther down the street. A black SUV, idling, its windows tinted, its engine humming. I followed her line of sight again and felt my stomach tighten. The driver, he wasn't looking at Mira. He was looking at me. The moment our eyes met through the windshield, he started the engine and pulled out into traffic. I did the same. Too quickly, maybe, and the SUV eased in behind me, following without hesitation. My pulse spiked. I took a turn. Took the same one. I accelerated. So did it. I cut through a gas station lot and into a side alley, killed my lights and waited, breath shallow, every muscle locked. After a few seconds, the SUV sped past, unaware. Something else was happening now. Something beyond Mira, beyond Locke, beyond suspicion. When I finally got home, still shaking, there was a car parked in my driveway. Locke's car. I felt heat rush through my veins. I stormed inside, ready to confront him, ready to drag the truth out of both of them if I had to. They stood in the living room, too close to each other, both startled when I appeared in the doorway. Mira stepped forward with a shaky voice, trying to explain, but the words tangled. Locke tried to speak. I cut him off. I demanded the truth. Mira cried. He stayed calm. I didn't. And then he said something that stopped me cold. You don't know the whole story. Those words were the fuse. Everything after them was fire. Locke's words hung in the air like smoke, thick enough to choke on. Mira stood behind him, tears streaking her face, her hands trembling as if she couldn't decide whether to reach for me or step farther away. I didn't move. Then start talking, I said. Locke exhaled slowly, wiped the corner of his mouth where a bruise was forming from our earlier struggle, and looked at me with a steadiness I no longer mistook for confidence. This wasn't about an affair, he said. Not between me and Mira. My eyes flicked toward her, but she didn't deny it. She simply closed her eyes, as if bracing for impact. It was about you, Locke continued. From the beginning. I stared at him. Explain. You've made powerful enemies in your line of work, he said. One of them decided to strike back. There was only one man I could think of. Vincent Hale. Locke nodded once. He hired me months ago, not to investigate your cases, to investigate you. The room felt smaller. He wanted proof of misconduct, Locke said. Anything he could use to ruin your reputation permanently. Your marriage, your business, everything. And Mira? I asked quietly. Myra's breath hitched, and she stepped forward, voice barely holding together. I didn't know at first, Cole. I swear I didn't. Adrian approached me when I volunteered at one of the hospital events. He said he was part of a donor audit, checking for potential conflicts of interest. It sounded legitimate. It wasn't, Locke said. Hale wanted access to your private life. Through her. I felt something heavy shift inside me. So when did you figure it out? Mira swallowed. The day he asked me to attend that meeting in the gray building. There were two men inside I didn't recognize. They talked about you, about how you'd taken something from Hale. Adrian tried to keep the conversation controlled, but it slipped, Locke finished, and she realized I wasn't who I claimed to be. I turned to him. So you threatened her? No, he said sharply. I warned her. Hale wasn't just looking for embarrassment. He wanted something irreversible. Mira panicked. She didn't know who to trust. She kept meeting with me because she thought I had a way to make Hale back off. I looked at Mira again. She was crying openly now, not trying to hide it. I should have told you, she whispered. Every single day I wanted to, but you were already acting distant, working late, getting angry over nothing. I thought you were slipping away, and I didn't want to push you further. So you hid everything from me instead. She nodded, defeated. What about the kiss? I asked, my voice breaking on the last word. Mira closed her eyes. It was one moment, one mistake. I was overwhelmed, scared, confused. Adrian comforted me. It shouldn't have happened. Locke didn't deny it. He simply stepped back, giving me room. Silence settled over the room like dust after an explosion. Finally, Locke said, Hale knows you're on to Mira. He'll assume she told you everything. That means he'll move quickly. You need to understand what he's capable of. I already do, I said. No, Locke replied. You don't. He reached into his bag and tossed a small flash drive onto the coffee table. That's everything Hale commissioned. Surveillance files, orders, communications, evidence that he paid me. Enough to bury him if you want to. I stared at the flash drive, the tiny object that had cost me weeks of suspicion and nearly destroyed my marriage. And why give it to me? I asked. Locke met my eyes. Because I'm done letting Hale use me. And because you were never supposed to get caught in the crossfire. We were, Mira whispered. Both of us. I didn't trust either of them, not completely. But I believed the danger was real. I could feel it in the air, the same way you feel an incoming storm. Locke picked up his coat. Hale won't stop. Not until he thinks you're neutralized. Be careful. He paused at the doorway. And whatever you do, don't stay in this house tonight. Those words should have meant more to me than they did. Once he left, Mira and I stood alone in the wreckage of our silence. I'm sorry, she said. For the kiss. For the lies. For everything. I wanted to forgive her. I wanted to reach for her, to hold onto the life we had before all this. But something inside me had cracked too deeply. I need time, I said. She nodded, defeated, and walked into the bedroom, closing the door softly behind her. I stayed in the living room, staring at the flash drive, running my thumb along the edge of it. Felt like holding a matchbook, full of potential fire. Much later, after she had fallen asleep, I poured myself a drink and sat in the dark, replaying every moment of the past weeks. Every lie, every truth, every shadow in between. Outside, the wind picked up. A sharp thunk hit the side of the house, like something falling against it. Then another sound, a crack, a pop, a faint smell of smoke. By the time I reached the hallway, flames were already crawling up the walls, hungry and bright. I shouted her name, ran for the bedroom, grabbed her by the arm and dragged her through the heat, through the smoke, out into the night. Neighbors screamed. Firefighters arrived. The house burned like someone had soaked it in anger. And as we stood barefoot on the cold pavement, coughing, shaking, watching our life go up in flames, I realized one thing with devastating clarity. This was Hale, his final warning, his way of saying he wasn't done. The truth hadn't set me free. It had only shown me who was willing to burn everything to the ground. And the war wasn't over.